And thank you for joining us. We are back with Christian Booth, and he is going to talk to us more about the Cloud OS. So take it away, Christian.
Thank you, sir. All right. Afternoon for all of you, but here in rainy Redmond, it is still early morning. I'm still trying to get some coffee in my system to get me moving forward. So I am Christian Booth. I'm a senior program manager here at Microsoft. I am in the cloud and data center management group. So focus a lot, obviously, on System Center, and my kind of secondary role is I manage the MVP program for cloud and data center management. So all of the operations manager and TPM and VMM and orchestrator MVPs. I make sure have all of the lovely things that they need and access to the product groups. So the focus of today's little presentation is just more like a clarification around the Cloud OS. There's a lot of conversations that we have with customers, with partners, with MVPs, and trying to get a kind of a better understanding of what the initiative is kind of from the Microsoft side, what we consider the Cloud OS, and kind of the understanding behind it. At any time, if anybody has any questions, just throw them out there. This is for you guys, so I can stop and we can talk about whatever at any point. So, okay, so basic challenges of cloud computing, governance, data access, connectivity, loss of control, the cost, the infrastructure, control of data. Some of these I'm going to kind of blaze through because I don't want you to feel like you're getting marketing material. But it is the idea of trying to set the precedence of, these are some of the things that we talk to customers about, that customers come to us that, well, we don't want to go to the cloud because we're in this country or this state, or we don't have the, financial capabilities to make super high speed, reliable connections. So that's, definitely the first thing that kind of comes to a frame of mind. The important thing to understand is that the cloud and the way that it is trying to define a set of tools and capabilities within us. So as an example, going through here are some of the pieces that we consider to be cloud computing. So on-demand and self-service. This isn't necessarily end-user self-service. This is IT consumption self-service. The idea that, IT folks, whether it's from a desktop level or a service desk level or server infrastructure architect, are building things for the rest of IT to consume, as well as, as an addition, having the end user be able to, consume some of these. And sometimes those end users are, maybe it's a DBA. So the idea of being able to build out a service for a reliable way to make a request for a SQL database. They don't need to know about the data infrastructure that's on the back end, but trying to make things really efficient. Anytime they need it, they can just go there and they can make the request and move through it. So that's kind of step one. So broad network access, so being able to access your devices, any device integration, looking at things like Intune and Configuration Manager and mobile device management and some of those components that are in there, as well as the raw data center infrastructure and being able to attach to those types of services anywhere you go. Resource pooling, reducing your overall costs, building out virtual infrastructure. Resource pooling really comes down to, the ability to take your storage, your compute, and your network and use it as efficiently as possible, to the, nth degree, making sure that all things are kind of covered and that you have the capacity designed. Elasticity, so, respond on demand, DR, having a flexible way to, get your compute out there to make sure that everything that you need is available. It basically helps you use what you need depending on the specific demand. Having the same benefits of resource pooling in terms of cost and resource utilization, and enabling, businesses to basically fluctuate the demand very quickly and very easily. The last one here is measured services. So it's, enabling, you as an IT administrator inside of your infrastructure, or as a service provider or a hoster or whatever you want to call them, to kind of define what the agreed upon price is. Now, this isn't always financial. sometimes it's just business, so I don't want to sell you on a, hey, let's get this really cool cost savings measurement behind here and have chargeback. All of those things are, yes, absolutely capable, but a lot of times it's a matter of measuring what people are using per what people are requesting. We have tons of customers that have said, oh, we have this application that requires, 100 gigs of memory and 5,000 terabytes of storage, and then you get that system built out for them, and they actually only use 30% at the highest peak that they've ever reached. So it's being able to kind of measure that and to kind of define what that is for you. So getting, the pieces that sit here kind of in the green bar kind of online. Now, the thing is, the definition that sits here is cloud computing, and the most commonly misunderstood part, and which is more or less kind of what I want to speak about today, is what the cloud is. And for us, it is not a location. It's a computing method, and that's the biggest disconnect with people. Immediately, the conversations that we have are, we want to move things to the cloud, and we want everyone on Azure, and that's not it at all. It actually is providing a consistent platform for your service providers on-premise, and then if you use Azure, that it's exactly the same. So one of the main things that we want to do is like looking at different historical analogies. So a couple of these components here, Travis Wright, formerly with Microsoft and a member of my team, we put this together for System Center Universe to kind of discuss some of that with, some of the folks over there. We've done a presentation similar to this with the MVP community to just make sure that everyone was on the same page. And the best thing that we came up with as kind of a historical analogy was looking at kind of the idea of computing as a commodity. And that really stems from like electricity. The only way I could come up with kind of an analogy for it is to focus on, the idea of how the electrical companies started, how it works, and the idea of moving to the grid. So the first thing that started out is, back in the day is your dynamos, right? These are hand crank machines that could produce electrical sparks, magnetic, around a coil wire. Inventions were great, and they could basically produce a small amount of electricity and kind of could be delivered really close to anything that was kind of attached to the motor or the dynamo. The next thing, obviously is, looking at, Thomas Edison creating a light bulb, which kind of looked at ways for other people to think, okay, how can we build, power stations? And so the first power station powered 3,000 lights in New York City, and this was all done off of steam-powered dynamos. Now, at the same time, there's the capability of things like hydroelectric, as a dam as an example for generating, electricity, wind, nuclear, and obviously solar. So how that is essentially how we look at the cloud. It's the idea that it can be wherever that you want. It can be powered locally for you. It could be something that gets, commoditized by a big manufacturer. It could be your Amazons. It can be your Rackspaces, your CBONs, your Azures, whatever, that everybody has the capability. You have the capability of providing kind of this commodity. So when you look at things like in modern times here, you have your central supplier of electricity, which we consider to be the service provider. So since it has become a commodity, it's bought and sold. So users of electricity can produce their own electricity using generators, using electricity, solar, various other things. An example of one of the things that we've looked at in, just even doing some background on this is hospitals. Is they have backup generators that exist almost from the beginning of the grid. So some of these places are always going to do it. We're not going, everyone should get on Azure, and this is the only way to do it. If you don't get on Azure, then we don't want to talk to you about the cloud. We want everyone to have the same experience so that your front end for everyone is similar, that you're leveraging things like the Windows Azure Pack, that you're leveraging the System Center and Windows Server tools, all of the components that we use to provide Azure to people that use it, but being able to define that as a service provider and then define it in your own enterprise so that you're not stuck to like, hey, this is the only way that you're going to get cloud computing. So service providers paying as you go, produce yourself, so obviously you have the upfront costs, pay to operate it, but you maintain it, you control it, and trying to find that similar interface between the two. So consuming this kind of compute as a commodity is, and basically the main reason that we use the kind of power analogy is the idea of being able to create it yourself. You don't care where electricity is coming from as long as it's reliable, it's cost effective, and it meets the requirements that you have. The same essentially is going to become true with cloud computing over time, and more as it gets commoditized, it will look like electricity now. So how does this actually fit within the Microsoft strategy? First is the service provider. You get all the compute power from a Microsoft, PaaS solution, an IaaS, a SaaS, but with Microsoft, it's more than only a service provider, right? It's being a technology provider. So the same thing with going back to the electricity analogy is think Microsoft like creating solar panels. You use solar panels on a massive scale to produce a massive quantity of electricity and then sell it, effectively a large electricity service provider. So the idea in yours as a service provider is doing the same exact thing, being able to take that same exact infrastructure and apply it to your enterprise so that the tools are exactly the same. So as you need to move things from an enterprise to Azure to a service provider or any different way of the few there, you are essentially looking at the same exact thing. Throwing Microsoft in there as, as the Azure service and how that's provided, we act as a service provider. You can be the service provider running the Microsoft platform and a technology provider. So, what was the, any of the demonstrations or anything that you guys have seen been focused around the Project Catal, which is now actually called the Windows Azure Pack? Oh. Go ahead. Someone wants to say something. I can hear it. I see Stanislav on here. I know you know about the lab. Yeah. Yes. So essentially, Project Catal, so the idea of this is like, here's Catal at a glance. Now, the reason that we actually say this, it kind of became a running joke, is that the Windows Azure Pack, because of its name, a lot of times people are like, oh, this is just some little free add-on pack that you throw on there and it's no big deal. And it's the idea of, it actually is so much more than that. So it defines the portal and the front end and the kind of data bus as to what we're going forward with in our infrastructure. So to kind of give you some examples is, Catal is what we use essentially to power things like Azure. So on-prem or as a service provider, we want to build gallery objects for you to build websites, build your databases, have a service bus, virtual machine delivery, and provide virtual networks. Where the Catal piece comes into play is the development of a service management API, so that we're using the same exact kind of platform for you to develop all of the items underneath it and be able to provide it forward. So as you take all the components, websites, databases, virtual machines, networks, leveraging the service management API, you build your tenant and admin portals the way that you need them, and you provide them kind of up front. This is a bit of how the architecture looks. So you have your tenant portal, you have your service admin portal. You take the service management API layer, that sits there on top, and then you have the ability as platform as a service provisioning and a management engine. You have the service provider foundation, so being able to develop for, tenant and admin, overall usage, the idea of taking these components in there with virtual machine manager, orchestrator, and operations manager to deliver up a service. So you say, allowing the tenant or an admin to come through and define based off of these components what you need in there. Leveraging your service bus, SQL Server, IIS, and Hyper-V, and obviously the base layer being Windows Server. So it's taking everything from the ground up and putting it underneath this common platform. So you're taking the service management API, and that becomes the way to develop so that you can take things like SMA, you can take PowerShell, you can look at this service provider foundation and customize everything, and it will all publish into the Azure portal so that you can make these self-service, really easy, elastic, and very movable objects within your service providers to your hosters to Azure, etc. So this is the way that it looks on-prem. I'm just going to get all of these out here. So on-demand self-service, so being able to create your subscriptions, choose plans, provision your networks, your VMs, apps, sites, etc. How this fits for the broad network access is, having your corp network authentication with or without Active Directory. You can leverage ADFS. The design for mobile devices to be able to plug in your Android, your iOS devices, as well as obviously your Microsoft platform devices, Windows phones, etc. Pulling your resources. This one will always, no matter where it's at, whether you're in Azure, whether you're at a host or service provider, or you're on-prem, is pulling your resources through your virtual infrastructure. The idea to where the Windows Azure Pack comes into play from this perspective, the CATAL, is that you are defining things like SQL. Instead of having people make the request for SQL servers that they can build stuff out in that has to stand alone, you can build this resource pool of SQL databases and give them a portal to go up front and say, well, I want to make a request for a database. And then oh, here, you have the ability to create a 20 gig database, and that's the maximum that you can do. For your elasticity, which is an extremely difficult word to say, easily and quickly add or remove, the capacity that you need in there, and then be able to plan your subscriptions, report on usage, and then you have an API so that you can integrate other billing services, third party. You can leverage your own custom reports that you're doing, within something like a SQL, and publish those out to a SharePoint, etc. So the Project CATAL is where it started. Then it became the Windows Azure Services for Windows Server, if that makes any sense. And then finalized, the idea for us was, hey, why don't we call this the System Center IaaS PaaS Manager, which no one liked either, so it became the Windows Azure Pack. So here is the vision. The vision is that the cloud operating system itself in your private cloud is leveraging Windows Server and System Center together as a tool set. That you take in the Microsoft cloud, you're leveraging Windows Azure, which is System Center and Windows Server. And for your service providers, System Center and Windows Server. All of these, leveraging the Windows Azure Pack on the service provider side, the private cloud side, plugging into the Windows Azure platform with Windows Server in Microsoft's cloud makes the interface and the platform consistent, leveraging the same REST APIs, leveraging OData, and looking at that service management API layer. So here is kind of the design. So design for the cloud computing model, so looking at all of the things that need to get done. So you have your scale, your reliability, security, the set of RESTful APIs, compliance, multi-tenant, and that same exact strategy for cloud computing is looked at in every scenario for an on-prem service provider, as well as obviously Microsoft at the same time. It's making sure that we're taking that consistent platform everywhere that we go with this infrastructure, so that when you design something, when you migrate something, when you build something, that you're getting that kind of same experience. So let's go through a couple of examples of what this looks like. So here's some, software as a service examples that we have that fit within this infrastructure. So SharePoint across on-prem service provider and then through Office 365. Taking your link on-prem in a service provider and then obviously through Office 365. Exchange on-prem, Exchange provided at a service provider and obviously through Office 365. And then moving through even for your Visual Studio and Microsoft Dynamics, that you can build the Dynamics infrastructure on-premise, service provider, or in Azure, and you can migrate back and forth between all of these tools. So building out these tools specifically starts with basically taking what we're doing in Azure, how that functionality in Azure sits, how we work with it, how we scale it, how performance and capacity is dealt with, so that we can measure and start to define the things that go underneath it. So this is an example of the things that are available through Windows Azure today as a subscription. So media services, BizTalk, multi-factor authentication, your Office cloud services for your virtual machines, websites, building out storage, SQL databases, and virtual networks. So the Windows Azure Pack for on-prem and service providers takes the virtual machines and the websites and SQL databases, and that was kind of the initial start. Now, going with System Center 2012 R2, we've moved into components to be able to have Active Directory and ADFS in there, and then including the Service Bus components so that you have, a lot more of those feature sets, kind of built in there. So you're, building the integration for, identity and authentication, and then, making kind of a true form on-prem version of the Azure experience, because some of the other components that are in there, obviously like BizTalk and CRM, those are available already as services that you can get online, and these are the basic ones, so you can go out and build what your tenant experience is going to look like. Adding virtual networks, and then now kind of the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service consistency. So as you can see, when you look at your on-premise, your service provider, and Microsoft, that the components that are needed to run your enterprise to be able to put things in kind of a multi-tenant way. And again, getting away from some of the specific things like media services. You can stream your own media. There's plenty of things there. Those are items that are provided as Azure if you have no infrastructure for that. So infrastructure is a service, the architecture for kind of your on-prem or your service provider. The similar slide that you saw earlier, the idea of the tenant portal, the service admin portal, building that service management API, leveraging your service provider foundation, and then, Windows Server through there. It's always kind of the basic piece at the end. So, hey, Scott, were you guys able to show a demo earlier? Did you have any problem with it? See if I can get everything in here, and I'll share, and we'll kind of walk through a scenario.
Yeah, sorry, it's working fine, but my unmute button is not working fine.
Nice.
You should be able to flip-flop between your desktop without having too many problems as long as you got one screen selected.
All right, so I will share. Let's see if it loads up. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, is that we can see the service provider portal. That's nice. Excellent.
Awesome. All right, so you have to forgive me. It's VMs built out on my current box, so there's a little, you'll see the certificate errors and all that fun jazz. So this is the service management portal. So this is the WAP. So you can, all the items that you have put in here, any websites, clouds that you have setting in your VMs, any of the infrastructure that you want to have built out there, service buses, you can connect to, different providers that you have, that are published internally or externally, and then being able to, connect and create different SQL servers, check connections, free space, things that are available. It also connects right out of the box with MySQL, so if you're running MySQL servers, this is just really basic stuff that's available right to you. There is, with R2, there is an automation plugin that gets you into the gallery so that you can start to add runbooks, so anything that you have there. So you make your connections into, orchestrate your orchestrator infrastructure, SMA, and then these are just a bunch of samples that kind of come along with it. So, sample managing a VM cloud, managing Azure. The nice thing about these is it'll obviously tell you when the jobs are run. So any PowerShell scripts that you've created to do any of this management can be published in here, and you can literally give people particular rights to it. You can start it from this portal, look at all the jobs that are going on, who the author is, and when you look at the author, you can actually see what the publish code is. So it's all right in here, ending with your signature block, obviously, for security. But you go through here, and then even draft. So if you want to go through here, you want to edit that runbook on the fly, you can open it up, and then I can actually now go in here right through the portal that is central and make any changes to the code that I need. If I go, oh, hey, you know what, I don't want to convert this to a secure string, I actually want to take this section out of here, I can remove it, and then I can save it. I can save it as a different one. I can run a test, so it won't even commit it to a permanent running until I say it's time to go. Just some really quick examples, discovering all modules that you have that are out there. and then you can define your plan. So you can go through and you can create a plan based off of, things like add-ons. So an example add-on is, we'll just create a quick one here, so a test add-on. And then you can select what I have plugged in here. So the 3 basic objects that I have plugged in are virtual machine clouds, SQL Server, and MySQL Server. So if I had multiple instances of SQL, I could go through here and I could pick which SQL servers I wanted. Maybe it's SQL Azure, SQL Enterprise, depending on the version. So you can have all that stuff in there, and then select it, and then it will generate you an add-on. And then through that add-on, you can go associate it to groups of people. So you can define your subscriptions, what they look like. Obviously, you see kind of the hash there, but what databases are available, who the administrators are. If you have, you want to add co-admins, and it can tell you, what's the plan, what's the username or Active Directory account. So I can say, it's Christian, and then I can add that person, up to the, into the subscription. So, and then your any add-ons that you have associated to it. And then go through here, you can see your user accounts, and then you can look at user costs. So there is part of the Azure Pack download. There's a ton of links for it out there. Scott, when I get you the slides, I'll have a big group of links for all the stuff for the Windows Azure Pack that you can go through, and everyone can go, and they have a step-by-step for each one of these components that we have up on the Microsoft website. We have some where we're linking to some of the MVPs that are really active in the community, and you can kind of see some of the environments that they've built and push those out. So anyway, so going through your plan, so pick like the SQL plan here. You can see what servers are available to it. Are they configured? You can change your access rights, decommission. You can clone it, delete a plan, link additional add-ons if you have others that have been created. Cancel all of that. Add any additional services. So maybe I want, as part of this service, that someone is going to request a VM and a SQL database. Maybe it's going to be a SQL install. So you have multiple options in there as far as things that you want to kind of connect up, work on, again, what your subscriptions are, any additional settings, like, maybe I want this to be unlimited, or I want to say, hey, per account that's associated to this, I'm going to allow 100 people to make, that are approved to make this, this data, deploy this database plan, and then whatever I have it advertised in. So you can add languages, you can import web hosting galleries, your basics here, German, French, Italian. You can get additionals like Dutch and some of the others by going and downloading some of the objects. So let's see here. I'm thinking about it. No, that is not what I wanted. That was a configuration page, which, so let's see here. Apparently we're not going to see the tenant portal. There we go.
That's funny. Every time you brought up the tenant portal, you kind of went on mute for some reason. It's kind of funny.
Nice. It's secret. So again, this, while this is kind of loading up, the WAP portal itself, fully customizable. You can add your own company logos in there, color changes, the whole 9 yards. So you have, tons of options to get in there and to make any modifications to it. It does leverage, role-based access controls. So so here's the standard. So this portal, the unlimited possibilities, you can put whatever you want there. This can be your whole thing. Right now, I'm just using generic accounts that are built into this actual work group device. So I say Christian, and then put my password in. Obviously, no servers here. And then it'll load up. It'll show me all the things that I have. It'll give me kind of a capacity overview of what I'm using. And then it'll allow me to to make any of my requests. So the plans that I have associated specifically to my account is the SQL subscription, so that I can actually, make a request for a SQL database and create a custom account.
And just to clarify, where is this running? Is this running in the cloud, or is this running on your on-prem cloud solution?
This is on-prem. This is the on-prem version of it. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for the folks watching, because that was where the big disconnect originally with the cloud thing was everyone thought everything had to be in the cloud, where this is actually all hosted internally by you. You serve it up to yourself. No one outside of your company can see it unless you open up your firewall. So.
Exactly.
Sorry, I just had to say that out loud, because I'm sure everybody's like rolling their eyes going, oh, this is another thing in the cloud. It's not in my office. No, this is what you can do at your office.
Yeah, and this, again, one of the reasons it's running kind of slow is this is all just, everything is running on one VM. This is a domain controller, a SQL server, an orchestrator box. Got a MySQL database store built on here. It's all, and then the Windows Azure packet, all its components. So it's all running here. So these are the databases that I've created. So you can, see, hey, it's created. It's on what subscription that I have. Look here. You can view some of the info about it. The connection string. So if I need to take my application and actually make a connection to it, this is the exact string that I need to make that function. So a lot of really cool stuff in there to be able to do it. I can change passwords. I can resize it if I have the capabilities, which here I don't. It's locked down. So I can't make it more than the 100 that I made it. And then when I go new, these are the only thing I can do. I can make stuff for my account that's associated to me. I can make a MySQL database, or I can make a SQL Server database. So we go here and we'll create a database. So let's open up right now. We're on the database server. So this is the databases that exist now. So I will go back here and we will call it ATL demo. I could pick the subscription plan that I want. We'll just leave it on the basic demo, and then pick, on the SQL plan, and pick this is just SQL Server. Because I have a connection to Azure as well, but it's actually not up because I'm in the office. So it's going to create the SQL plan for me. I click next, and I go, I need to create an admin for this local account, since this is, right now, it's all work group based. If you're joined to the domain, it will ask you for domain credentials or a group that you want to apply this to. So I go, we're going to make this ATL test. I'm give it a password. Make sure my passwords match. And hit OK. It'll sit there, tell me that it's creating it. Everything looks good. I can see the ATL demo clearly up here. And now I can go back here into my databases, run a refresh, and now we will see the ATL demo. Run down into the security logins, and we will see where did it go. Let me refresh here. The ATL test account, and then it has all the things that it's picking up from SQL. It's picking up the forced password, server roles that I'm allowed to, user mappings, etc. And then we go back, check our SQL databases here, and we'll get a refresh, and it'll show us that we have another database that's been created. And it's pretty simple. I mean, the creating it's just a matter of walking through and kind of carving it out. And like I said, once you go through some of the setup and some of the links that we'll provide, there's a ton of information to walk through, all kinds of really simple demonstrations. Like the buildup of this infrastructure here took me about 45 minutes. The longest part was sitting through the SQL install. Everything else is fairly quick and pretty easy to do. As we saw the tenant portal piece earlier, I'll go back to it. The setup is all done through here. It's really basic. And I'm just going to click reconfigure. What you want your server name to be, what kind of authentication you want to use, your passphrases, and then it just essentially sets up after that. So building the WAP pod is pretty simple to do. And then picking your languages right on the fly.
Okay, and I think we just lost your feed.
Yep, I was switching back over to the...
There we go, good.
Got it? All right, cool. So, again, we saw that one earlier, kind of the idea that we have the consistent platform. So the idea is to take it from this text. I don't know why it's showing up black here. It's actually white on my screen. So development, management, all of the data, identity, and virtualization all built within that same infrastructure. That we're leveraging SQL Server, that we're leveraging System Center, and the Windows Server, putting things like the Windows Azure Pack on top of it, so that you're getting that constant same flow of everything that you need. Going through and building out your applications. So for the Cloud OS, running SQL Server, having it in a VM, building out your websites off IIS, and then your service bus so that you can do, platform as a service for your on-prem, or move it into Azure so that you can build those service buses between the two. So you can have a connection for an application like SQL is always a really easy example of, some of the functionality that's there in Azure that's in your service provider. If you're a service provider, if you're a hoster, if you take some of your applications, you have a high-end financial application and you want to have a DR solution. So you go to a Rackspace or someone like that that's using the Windows Azure Pack and has the service bus capabilities. Then you can make the subscription so that your on-prem SQL Server is running, it's there, and if something were to happen, that becomes your DR, that through your service bus that you can have it roll into another one of your providers, make it available on the outside to a shared company or something like that. And here's the basics for your management, and looking at how the enterprise, the service provider, and Microsoft kind of manage this from that layer up is identity for all three of these is built off of Active Directory. Your provisioning is done through App Controller and Orchestrator. So the idea of App Controller is being able to manage your Azure subscriptions for virtual machines, your on-prem, and service providers that are there, so that you're leveraging still the same System Center tools that you're used to, and then putting the Windows Azure Pack and the Catal portal as your interface to all of those pieces. And then obviously monitoring with Operations Manager. So making sure that the management packs are there, that you're monitoring your external infrastructure, your service provider infrastructure, and the enterprise infrastructure. So we get kind of back to the idea of, what, our challenges are, and it's understanding that, when you're running System Center and the Azure Pack on premise or consuming cloud computing from a service provider, you're using, the WAP and System Center to kind of help address these challenges. And it gives you the ability to kind of adopt that cloud computing model. You can leverage them in really small doses. The idea, like we said, of taking something like SQL and making it, something self-service. Look at compliance and how some of the governance packs that are available through System Center can kind of help keep that available. It's all within the idea of what Microsoft's Cloud OS infrastructure is. So here's the roadmap. Obviously, some of these dates are already there, and but we wanted to talk specifically kind of about the bottom two. Obviously, System Center 2012 R2 came out in October, so that's 9 months. The Windows Server and System Center vNext, the goal is to keep the cadence that we're on, is to pick the products and focus areas as they're needed for each cycle, so that we can take care of, in a shorter term, getting bugs, getting things tuned for performance, the reliability to add the features where we need to make that response from the customers, get people excited. As I kind of stated at the beginning, is my role in working with the MVPs is to work with the community, is finding out where the gaps are between what you're deploying, what we want you to deploy, and the tools that are available. Understanding that when you look at System Center and you put the Windows Azure Pack on top of it, and you're looking at the Service Management API and PowerShell and those things, where are the learning gaps? Where are the template gaps, the capabilities? And trying to make sure that as we keep this kind of cloud speed cadence, that with each section that we're providing the focus and the energy into the areas that are most important for all the consumers that are out there. Because obviously, if we make really cool products and nobody uses them, that doesn't really help us any. So it's making sure that your feedback is being taken, and looking at providing this software, defining it for the cloud, driving that consistency, and having value. Taking the components that we have and improving everywhere that we can and what we're capable of. As you saw with R2, I don't know how many of you have deployed it, but there was a lot of work that was done in Virtual Machine Manager. I mean, that was really the focus, is trying to define and really tie up that cloud computing initiative and make sure that our virtual infrastructure is getting better and had more to offer through the virtual gateway that comes with VMM. Looking at NVGRE for networking and making some of those things possible for multi-tenancy. And that's your final sales slide right there. That's the one. That's the magic that has it all. So, realizing the benefit in any location, it's really about understanding that System Center as a whole, we went from having operations manager, from having configuration manager, into having service manager and DPM. With System Center going forward now, the idea, the voice of the cloud operating system is to get away from focusing specifically on, I want to be a SCOM guy, I want to be a DPM guy, I want to be a VMM guy. And the idea is that getting it more aligned with what we're trying to do, a scenario, if you will, saying these are the scenarios that I'm responsible for in my infrastructure. My responsibility as a IT pro is to make sure that servers are deployed in an easy, templated fashion with governance, with performance monitoring, and that you're picking the objects and solving the scenario that you have and delivering the scenario, and trying to make these gallery objects and things like the Azure Pack, letting people focus on the areas that they are really good at, but being able to provide the front end for other folks in IIT to gain the benefit of that. That you take your SQL clusters, you put all those databases together in whatever fashion of high availability and scale that suits you, that you can make it dynamic and try to reduce the complexity of the other people needing it, so that you can go, look, this is the parameters of database types and sizes. You can have 1 million if you want and publish them out there, and based on what group you're in, you only see what you have, to get us away from, having a config manager guy down in the basement, making packages and OS deployment, images all day long, and nobody ever sees from them, and then all of a sudden, Windows 16 goes out and no one knows. So.
Hey, what's wrong with working from your basement?
I know, I threw that in there for you. That was all I really had. I was trying to blaze through it as much as possible, just so we could kind of just cover the content and do a little bit of an overview and at least get a chance to look at the WAP. And we're going to get some more up on Microsoft's blog. So one of the responsibilities that I have in the team is, keeping some of the content up on the System Center blog, and we are definitely kind of building a bit of content internally, demos, some of the walkthroughs, and trying to make sure that stuff's out there. Starting the week of I want to give you an exact date so that I am not completely wrong, I believe it's the weekend of the 18th. I could be a huge liar, who knows?
What's that?
The MVA training stuff.
Yeah, starting the 18th.
Yeah, so the Microsoft Virtual Academy is doing a huge series on virtualization and cloud deployment and automation. The guys over there, specifically Simon Perryman, has built out a ton of infrastructure and has these really great modules that they're going to start putting out in videos, how to walk through, that you can go download the templates and see, here's Orchestrator in action, deploying a bunch of VMs, allowing you to make parameter changes to hardware and memory and virtual CPU on the fly. So I highly recommend looking at some of that stuff. Do you leave any notes up, Scott, anywhere?
I can post them when I post the videos that I slice and dice. Sure.
Okay, I was just going to say, at the beginning, the first slide, my contact info's in there and my Twitter. You guys, don't hesitate to reach out if you have a question. Be happy to help you as best I can. And if not, at least try to route around to someone that may know the answer. Or you can bother Scott, and Scott knows how to get a hold of me. So.
Yeah, you're going to have to send